Hi everyone, hope that you all are doing well. So in the initial days of development, wherein your colleges or even in your some of your organizations, when you would be starting working in the organization, you might have heard the word that is JDBC. So that stands for Java Database Connection, right? And as the name suggests, that it helps in establishing connection between your Java application and the database. So if we go back to the older days wherein we used to develop Java applications and we used to establish database connection and used to run some operations on the database, at that moment we did not have the Spring framework, right? So right now what happens is that we have Spring framework and we can use the Hibernate connection in a JPA way, and then we can simply make an interface and we are done with the repository part. We can simply make methods and we can have our operations on the database. Previously, when we used to develop Java applications, we used to actually write these codes of connecting the application with the database manually, right? We used to establish a lot of things. We have to write a lot of lines of code, like making a data source, loading drivers, establishing connections, creating statements, executing those queries, and then processing the result sets, and also closing the resources that we have opened. Right, so there was a lot of lines of code that we used to write at that moment. So that actually created a lot of errors in the code, and like we forgot to handle some of the exceptions in the code, or maybe we forgot to close the resources. So that caused bugs at the time of application run, right? So to solve that, Spring Framework has brought a collection of all the codes into one template that is called as JDBC template. So what is a JDBC template? Like it's a Spring Framework template that provides you the same functionalities that you used to write, like creating connection with the database and running all those things, data source creation, connection pool creation, connections creation. So that has now been handled by the Spring Framework template. Just that you have to use that template and run your queries, execute your queries, and get the result set out. So today what we'll do, we'll be running a simple code wherein we'll be establishing a connection with the database in our Spring Boot application, wherein we'll be using JDBC template to establish the connection with the database and run some queries, like to fetch data or to insert data. I'll make a separate video of complete CRUD using JDBC template. Right now we'll go by a basic application wherein we'll be working on MySQL database. We'll be creating a project that could be a kind of an hello world for JDBC template. So let's get started. I'm on the IDE. Let's create a project here. So let me name it as JDBC template implementation. It would be a basic implementation. And here the Java version is 17. So the version of Java is 17 and the type is Maven, packaging jar and language Java. And let the package is com.spring.implementation. That's a group. And the packaging is on com.spring.implementation. Let's go on the next screen and let's select the dependencies. So the default version here is Spring Boot version 3.2.1. So my 3 dependencies are added. Now let me import the project and let's get started on development part. So the project is ready, project is imported, and this is the structure of the project. So we'll start quickly, like we have to make few packages. A simple REST application, as like a REST application, we'll be making some packages. First, let me show you the pom.xml. So we have some dependencies. So you can see that we have the JDBC dependency, Spring Boot started JDBC. So this is the Spring Framework provided dependency. That is a JDBC template that will help you out in connecting your Java application with the database in that JDBC manner that we used to do in the earlier stages when Spring Framework was not there. So then we have the MySQL connector dependency and my Spring Web dependency, right? So these are the dependencies that we have added in our project. And let's go on the structure of the project and let's make the packages now. So let me create a few packages. One would be that we'll be requiring a model package. as an entity package wherein we'll be having the object that we have to save into the database. So let me name it as model to make a repository. So we need to establish the database connection. So we need a database repository package too. Let me make a repository. And then as I said that this would be a REST application. So we need a controller package too. Let me make a controller package. Right. So now, if you see that a similar kind of a structure we make for the Hibernate based database connections, right? ORM based database connections. Right now we are working on the JDBC based database connection. So the same way you can make your application. First, let's work on the model class. So we'll be making a new model class. Let's take an example of a person, right? We'll be storing the person's first name and the last name, right? So let me make a class of person. Now you can see here that so this is my person class, and I have added few fields that will be stored into the database. That is the first name and the last name and the ID of the person, right? Now you can see that we'll not be making this model class like we used to do for previous Spring Boot applications or the microservices that we used to make, wherein we mark the model as @entity and @table, and we used to define the table name, right? So we won't be doing it like that way because it's a JDBC based application, and you might have noticed that I haven't added the Spring JPA dependency also. Right, so that Spring JPA dependency or the Jakarta dependency helps us in marking the class as @entity and @table. So what we have to do is this will be a simple entity wherein there are fields, and we need the getters and setters for these fields, right? So let me generate the getters and setters by going to the source and generate getters and setters. So this is a default the getters and setters that have been made by the IDE. So let's take it this way only. So now the next thing is that model is ready. Model says that we'll be storing the first name, last name, and the ID of the person in the database, right? And now what we have to do is, next thing is that we have to make a repository. So here what I'll be doing is to avoid the confusion, I'll be first making an interface of a repository, and then I'll be making an implementation of a repository. And also if you go by the Spring MVC structure, so that says that in between the repository and controller, there should be a service that should interact. Right now I am working on a basic example, so I am not making a service package. I am not making any service class. I am directly interacting the controller with the repository. So the controller will be having the endpoint that will be hit from the Postman, and in the controller, whatever the code is, like if the requirement is to hit the database, it will directly go to the repository and hit the database. It won't be going to through the service, right? So if you have some logic in between, you can write a service, but right now it is a very basic example, so that's why I'm writing a repository directly. Also, when I'll be covering the CRUD example in the next video, then I'll be making a service class in between. So let's make a class here, interface here. Let me make an interface, and let's say it as person repository. And what we can do is we can have an implementation of this person repository. So we'll have a class that will be, so this is the interface of person repository, right? And we can also have the implementation of person repository. So let me go and create another class. So now it would be a class person repository implementation. Let me say it as person repository impl, right? So it will be implementation of personal repository. So first mark these classes as @repository to tell the Spring that this is a bean, and you have to consider that bean if injected somewhere, right? So let me mark this also as @repository. Let's save this, and let's save this too. So now this is a structure of repository, right? So we can simply go into the controller part, and as I said that we'll be working on a basic example of saving the data to the database, right? So let's make a controller class too, and then we'll write the code in the repository. So let's go to new and let's make a class that is the person REST controller, right? Person REST controller. And what I have to do is I have to mark this as a REST controller, right? So what we have to do is we have to mark this class as a REST controller. So let me say REST, and then we have to make few endpoints. So what we can do is I have made the endpoints here, right? So first one is the getting of the data, right? We are getting all the person's data, and what I'm doing is I have injected the person repository, that is the interface in the controller, and I'm hitting a find all method here, right? The same way we used to do for our microservices based on the JPA, right? And then I have made a post mapping that would be adding the data to the database, and we are simply returning that the status is created. So the status code would be 201, right? Nothing else would be returned, no message would be returned. You can add a message here as well, right? So I'm using a save method here. So now what we have to do is we have to go to the person repository and we have to make few methods here. So it is returning a list of persons. So the find all method would be defined as a list of persons. So let me define the methods in the, so we have the implementation, we have the interface wherein we have defined a find all method and a save method. So we are calling a find all method to find all the data and save method to save the data, right? So now you can see that the error is being shown in the person repository IMPL because it is implementing person repository. So we have to add the unimplemented methods, right? So you can see that there would be option of add unimplemented methods. So you have to add these two methods in this repository implementation, and also we have to give the complete implementation of what we are finding from the database. So I'll be working on MySQL database. We'll be configuring MySQL database in the application.properties the same way that we used to do for our microservices too, right? So we have to write code to find. Using this only, we'll be getting the data from the database. So if you see that this is our JDBC template that has been provided by the Spring Framework, org Spring Framework.jdbc.co.jdbc template, right? So it has been provided by Spring Framework. If you go into this class implementation, so you will see that previously while establishing the connection, so you can see that it is setting the data source, setting the after property set. So now if you see the implementation of this query method, so it says that you have to pass the query as the first parameter, and the second parameter should be a row mapper. So what is the role of the row mapper? Row mapper basically maps your result set, the data that has been provided by the database when you run the query, to the object that you have made, right? So it will map a single row to that object and create that object and return a result to you. So it asks that you have to provide the second parameter as a row mapper. So let's first define a row mapper. Let me make a method that creates a row mapper for us and map the data to the person class, right? So this is my static class of person row mapper that is actually defining a method that is a map row method. That's an overridden method of row mapper, right? And we are implementing the row mapper, so we have to override this method of map row, wherein we are getting a result set and a row num, which is helping us to map this result set data to the person object, and then we are returning the person object, right? So here also what we have to do is while we are hitting the select query, we have to pass new person row mapper. So if we define this, so the data will be so this is my select query that will be getting the data from the database, and this is how you can hit the query from JDBC template, right? Now what we have to do is we have to add data, we have to save data to the database. So what we can do is we have to simply insert data into the database. So we can simply get the insert. So what we are doing here is we can we are writing a simple insert query, insert into person, and our columns are first name and the last name. And the value is that we used to do when we used to write queries, we have to define the values as question marks. And then we used to replace the question mark with the value that we have to set dynamically. So here what will happen is what we are getting is that we have a person object here, and we are simply getting the data of person get dot first name and the last name. This question mark would be replaced by these two values, right? these two values will be replacing the question marks values. If you see the update method, right? So this is my insert query to save the data. So now if I tell you that the implementation of JDBC template in our application has been complete, we have written the complete repository using JDBC template, and this is a basic kind of a queries that we have run. We'll also cover the complete CRUD application in the next video that I'll be making. First now let's go to the REST controller. Before I run the code, I'll request you that if you people are finding my videos knowledgeable, and if my channel provides you knowledge, provides you knowledge on coding part, so please do like, share, comment on the videos, and also please subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so that whenever I upload a new video, you get a notification. So we have the REST controller here, but we have to define a mapping too. So let me say it as a request mapping, and what I can say is I can simply say person, right? So if we hit the /person with the get mapping, this get all person will be called, and if we hit the /person with the post mapping, then add person will be called, right? So this is my complete JDBC application. This is how we can establish connection of JDBC template with our database. So now the properties for the database, right? So as I said that I am using the MySQL database. So what we have to do is we have to add some properties to our application.properties to establish the. So these are some basic properties that we require to create connection with the database. One is the database data source URL and defining the schema, and then the username, password, and the drivers, right? So I have to go to the MySQL workbench and create this JDBC template as a schema. So let me run a query, create schema, right? So I have to create schema JDBC template. So I'm running this query, and yes, it has been created. So let me refresh it, and let me mark this as a default schema, set as default schema, right? So as you might be knowing that when we used to work with the Java application with the JDBC connections, we used to create tables in the database manually. And right now also we have to go and create tables manually that we use. Basically the use the transition from Spring Frameworks JPA Hibernate way connections and to the JDBC template connection would be done only for the legacy applications. If you might find something that is fruitful that we can use JDBC template in this applications, you can comment down below in the video. What we can do is we have to now create a table in the database, right? So how to create the table? So this is the query to create the table in the database, right? And let me execute this query. So the execution of the query is being done. Let me see, the table has been created. Yes, the person table has been created, right? If I would have not created this table in the database, when I'll run the application and hit the endpoint, it would have said that there is no table in the database, right? So now what we can do is our application is ready to run. So let me save all the things and let me go to the main class of the application. Let me right click and let me run the code. So you can see that our application has started. So my application has started. So to test the application, let's go on Postman and let's hit a post call of /person. And we have a body with the first name as Smith and the last name as Daniel. You can put any name. I've just taken a vague example here. So let me hit this request. So it says 201 created, right? So let's go to the workbench, MySQL workbench, and let's try to fetch the data from the database first. So yes, you can see that the ID is one, the first name is Smith and the last name is Dino. And let's put some more data here, let's say Dio, and let's say Dio Alex, and let me put this data as well. So it says created. Let me refresh this again. So we have two entries. Now if I go to the get call and if I hit the get call through the Postman, these two data should be returned to us, right? So yes, so you can see that these two data is being returned to me that I have inserted using the JDBC template. So this was it from this video. This was a very basic example of how to connect your Spring Boot application with JDBC template and perform few operations with the database. So it might have given you an idea of how to work on JDBC template. Furthermore, the CRUD application on JDBC template I'll cover in the next video. This was it from this video. Hope that you people like, share, comment on the video, and if new to the channel, please subscribe the channel and press the bell icon. Hope to see you in the next video. Till then, happy learning.